So anyway, I thought I was like, damn, I'm so fucking high, dude. I think this old dude's trying to fuck my girlfriend. And I'm like, this some killer weed. Because I've been around. I mean, I was high on some weed one time where I couldn't bend my legs one time. And it wouldn't have been bad, but I was standing up when I started smoking. If I'd have been sitting down, no issue, you know. But when I'm standing up already and then I can't bend my legs, it was just hell, dude. I'd have a friend of mine pick me up and lay me down. And I've been high. This weekend I was thinking about when I was young, they had, I'm pretty gullible. And when I was young, they had a time where I didn't talk to my mother for probably about a year and a half. And they had a man called my school and ended up sending me an email. And this is when they had email. And a man sent me an email, and it turned out to be my great uncle. And I don't even know how many great, my father was 70 years old when I was born. A lot of you guys know that. And so my dad was born in 1910. So the great uncle, I'm keyed up. I'm intrigued to see what's going on, and who knows how, he wasn't like 100 and something years old, but he was an older man. So I met up with him. He was nice. And then my girlfriend, I had a girlfriend at the time. So we'd go over there and spend some time with him, hang out, have some snacks or something, or maybe listen to some music, some adult music. And then he one time started getting us a little bit cooked up on buying us some marijuana and liquor, apple cider liquor, and we'd have a good little time hanging out. And then one time I got real high, and he Melt, what they called him, Uncle Melt, like, something that was frozen one time and now it's not, like that, Melt. And he tried to hook up with my girlfriend. And at first I thought, oh man, I'm just high, dude. I'm so fucking high that I think that my uncle or great uncle's trying to bang my chick. And I don't even know if we were banging. So, that's pretty ballsy of him. It's nice of him to assume that I'm getting sex, but it's also kind of fucked up of him, if I'm not, to think I'm going to let him bang my girlfriend first before I get to bang her. I'm young. I'm working towards those sexual goals, as a child. And so anyway, I thought I was like, damn, I'm so fucking high, dude. I think this old dude's trying to fuck my girlfriend. And I'm like, this some killer weed. Because I've been around. I was high on some weed one time where I couldn't bend my legs one time. And it wouldn't have been bad, but I was standing up when I started smoking. If I'd have been sitting down, no issue, But when I'm standing up already and then I can't bend my legs, it was just hell, dude. I'd have a friend of mine pick me up and lay me down. And I've been high, where you don't know what's going on, right? But I hadn't been high where I'm like, holy shit, dude, this old dude's trying to bang my lady. And that's some killer shit. But turns out anyway, fast forward, my mom and I kind of reconciled, and I didn't go back over there much after that. And then my mom and I were talking one time, and I'm just telling her, we're talking about family and stuff, and I'm telling her about Uncle Melt, and she's like, who? And I'm like, Uncle Melt, Melton, I guess. I assumed it was, short for Melton. If that's even a name now, I don't even know. It doesn't sound like a name now that I'm saying it, Melton. Have I met anybody in Melton? I don't know. But she's like, she's like, what Uncle Melt? And I'm describing her. She's like, you don't even have an Uncle Melt. You don't have an Uncle Melton. And I'm like, holy shit, dude. And that was it, man. So some dude, I don't even know, found me somehow through the school system, hung out with me and my girlfriend, got us fucked up, tried to bang my girlfriend. Like a senior citizen, dude, that I don't even know. So you want to talk about the Special Olympics? We've all been out there in some damn Special Olympics. We've all had some hurdles and some things moving a little bit because it's gotten so big it can't barely, turn around in the tank, but it is in the tank. Onward, Andre, onward.
Say your father's from Nicaragua, so do you consider yourself Latin American? Because, you kind of come up with some stereotypical shit sometimes, and that's just kind of ridiculous, bro. I don't know. Not that it matters, but I'm just curious.
Gang, bro. Bailar. You know what I'm saying? Do I consider myself Latin American? I'll tell you this, man. I'll tell you this. My father was straight up out that Nicaragua. And where are my Nicars at? Where are my real Nicars? And he, he lived there till he was 14, and he came over to New Orleans, or to America, United States of America. And he used to talk a lot in Spanish, man. I don't know what the fuck he was talking about. because I was a child, you know, and he was 70 when I was born. So by the time we got to really talking, he's about 80, you know, so he coming in kind of with that 80-year-old perspective, you know, slanging that Espanol around the house. And I didn't really get to feel him that much, you know, and feel that vibe of him. You know, he took me one time to, I think, Puerto Vallarta. One time he took me there to do something. And he might have been involved in some shady activity, actually, because he used to go back and forth between Central America and America, Estados Unidos. And I think he might have been involved in a little bit of shady shit. And I don't know what an 80-year-old man can get involved in that's shady. You know, probably not drug muling or anything like that. Maybe running a little bit of small bags of coke or something. I don't know. But he was caught up in a little bit of the dark arts right there. And I knew even as a child that something was, you know, a little bit wild going on. But did I feel it? No, because I didn't feel much from my father. You know, I remember him. He told me, obviously, he told me that I was a survivor. He told me that I had the heart of a lesbian. He always told me that since I was young, because I had that vibrant heart, you know, when I got hit by that Trans Am and survived it. And he told me, he told me that I'd be okay. You know, I think he kind of started to kind of prepare me for the fact that he wasn't going to be around forever. He got me into doing stand-up comedy, really. When I think about it, my father used to be that guy. He used to go to, you know, he was involved in some crazy shit, and he bought a Cutlass 88 off a couple of brothers, and it had speakers in the back. But he didn't mind the speakers because he was hard of hearing. So he'd be rolling through the town and through our neighborhood and stuff, you know, with a couple of 12s in the back. Just, you know, just killing them, but with some, whatever they were, 16s, I don't know what they were. But he couldn't hear it, but he had that bass. So he'd be listening to like NPR or all these political talk shows, Rush Limbaugh or something, and just Paul Harvey. You know, he had that. And one of the speakers I remember was blown out and some Chinese food got stuck in it. And he used to rattle, bro. It sounded like a huge fucking rattlesnake in the back of that trunk. And my dad had that, you know, and he had, and he was still trying to make some money because him and my mother were always fighting. He had to make some money to survive. But did I feel, you know, I remember kids in our neighborhood would call me a spick all the time. Because, you know, my brother and I and my sisters had, you know, kind of a little bit of tan skin. And for our neighborhood, for our town, we had very tan skin. You know, it was very, I mean, you almost, after us was just black. You know, there wasn't a lot of middle grade going on. So, and you didn't have a lot of mixed people back then. You didn't have a lot of mulatto people. You didn't have a lot of black, white people. And some people get upset at these kind of terms, whatever, man. You know what I'm talking about. We didn't have a lot of people that were mixed. It wasn't as popular then. You know, you didn't have people with a black and a white parent or a black and you know, and we only had a couple of ethnicities, you know. You know, I didn't feel it. You know, my father would tell me stories a lot about growing up, you know, and he talked about they didn't have a lot of money growing up. He talked about the poverty that was in the country. You know, his family was down there. They worked in a church and they were building a church. And it might still be there. I'm not sure. I plan to go back sometimes. But I think what it did do, it inspired me to do a couple of things. You know, it's inspired me to try and learn Spanish. It's inspired me I'd like to do a special in Spanish one day to be able to perform, you know, for people that catch that Latino vibe, you know, for anybody that's ever been Latino or anybody that's ever, you know, been kidnapped and, you know, in, you know, Bolivia or somewhere or, you know, one of those drug countries or something like that, or any, you know, a little bit of homage. So it makes me think like that. But, you know, I guess I've always felt maybe just a little bit obscure, a little bit different. I know that when I speak Spanish that it really comes out of me naturally. You know, it comes out of me like it's supposed to be in me. You know, it's like when you open up a tube of toothpaste and you see toothpaste in the tube and it makes sense to you. That's how I feel about that Latin culture, that vibe, you know. But I remember my father doing some shady shit, man, when I was young. He'd be cooking fucking bananas in the front yard and shit like that. You know, and some of it, you don't know how much of it was Latino and how much of it was just the fact that he was in his 80s and he was starting to lose his mind and he had a griddle. So it's a lot of mixed stuff going on. But he, you know, he wrote for some newspapers down there, and, you know, I guess so it's in my blood. I feel like it's in my nature and it's in my nurture. I think it's in both of those things. So that's what's up, man. Yeah, I mean, I guess I do stay a little bit on the surface, maybe about some stereotypical stuff, but I would do some stuff for, you know, for another country, man. I'd do something for my fellow Nicaraguans. You know, I mean, I don't think I'd drug mule or anything. You know, I mean, honestly, I'd probably, if I put a couple grams up my bum, I'd probably hope they bust so I could get that free hit. and it wouldn't count as relapsing, or as, as not being sober. So I might, poke the bag with a needle or something before I put that, that sweet white unicorn up my buttocks. But anyhow, it's a good question, man, and I appreciate it. It's a good question. I appreciate it.